السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll continue with the 50 hadith, the continuation of the 40 hadith originally by Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, and the next 10 or the next 8 by Rajab rahimahullah in his book Jami Ulum wal Hikam, to make them 50 inshallah ta'ala. And we start by hadith number 44. He says عن عائشة رضي الله عنها عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: الرضاعة تحرم ما تحرم الولادة. خرجه البخاري ومسلم. الرضاعة تحرم ما تحرم الولادة. This hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim, and it's very simple words, but it's a chapter in fiqh. It's a very important subject in matters of fiqh, as the previous hadith with regards to inheritance. This one is with regards to al-rada'a. And al-rada'a is breastfeeding. So al-rada'a or breastfeeding, tuharrim from making haram. It makes haram, makes forbid, it forbids. ما تحرم الولادة. What al-wilada forbids. Al-wilada is giving birth. Al-wilada is giving birth. So it's basically a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that came with other words, as Ibn Rajab rahimahullah mentioned in the sharh underneath, which is يحرم من الرضاع ما يحرم من النسب. That means what al-rada' or breastfeeding forbids, what forbids what's forbidden by lineage, or the physical lineage forbids certain relationship are forbidden when it comes to matters of marriage. So the same thing with breastfeeding. And to understand this hadith, we know in the nasab or the lineage or relationships, there are certain relationships that are forbidden for a person to marry. As the ayah in Surah An-Nisa, حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمْ أُمَّهَاتُكُمْ وَبَنَاتُكُمْ وَأَخَوَاتُكُمْ وَعَمَّاتُكُمْ وَخَالَاتُكُمْ وَبَنَاتُ الْأَخِ وَبَنَاتُ الْأُخْتِ. 7 are mentioned in this verse that are forbidden for men to marry. حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمْ أُمَّهَاتُكُمْ, your mothers, وَبَنَاتُكُمْ, and your daughters, وَأَخَوَاتُكُمْ, and your sisters, وَعَمَّاتُكُمْ, your aunts from the father's side, وَخَالَاتُكُمْ, your aunts from the mother's side, وَبَنَاتُ الْأَخِ, and the daughters of your brother, وَبَنَاتُ الْأُخْتِ, and the daughters of your sister. So these are 7 that are forbidden for a man to marry with regards to lineage, with nasab. The hadith says what's forbidden in nasab, in physical relationship, is also forbidden with al-rada', with breastfeeding. That means each and every one of these 7, if it's from al-rada', from breastfeeding, they are forbidden. So the mother from breastfeeding, the daughter from breastfeeding, the sister from breastfeeding, the aunt from breastfeeding from the father's side, his aunt from the breastfeeding from the mother's side, from his mother of breastfeeding, and his daughter from breastfeeding, and his sister from breastfeeding, and so on, and the daughter of the sister and the daughter of the brother, exactly like the verse. So usually, the masail or the issues with al-rada' or breastfeeding, it gets confusing sometimes. But it's very important to see the relationship between the one that breastfed and the one that breastfed him. So a man breastfed from a woman, right? So then you see the relationship that this is his mother in breastfeeding, right? So the ayah is, as we heard, and the same thing with the breastfeeding. And as the ulama, they mentioned, to make it easy also to understand it, we have here a mother that breastfed, and it's called mother, his mother from breastfeeding. So he breastfed from a woman. So this is called Murdi'a. That means it's a breastfeeding mother or a woman. And there is the owner of the milk, if it's correct to say, which is her husband. You know, this is where her milk comes from, meaning her husband, the husband of the mother that breastfed, and the one that breastfed himself. So these are basically three, and the relationship that comes from them to know the details of who's forbidden and who's not. Each one of them, meaning the mother or the woman and her husband and the one that was breastfed, they have, as mentioned before, the usul and the furu'. The usul are the father and above, and the furu' are the sons and daughters and below, grandchildren and so on. And they call it the hawashi, or the hawashi are the brothers and sisters that go sideways. So the woman that breastfed someone, her father and above, and her mother and above, right? These are the usul of it, of her usul. And her branches, meaning her sons and daughters and grandsons and so on, and her brothers and aunts and uncles and so on. And the same thing for the husband. He has usul, father and above, and furu' and the brothers and sisters. And the same thing with regards to the one that breastfed. Al-rada' or to be breastfed, it does not affect the when it comes to the one that breastfed himself. His brothers and sisters, his usul, his father and mother are not affected by him breastfeeding from someone else. Right? So that means if someone is breastfed from another woman and she has daughters, these daughters, of course, are forbidden for the man that was breastfed from their mother. But his brothers are not forbidden for these women because the breastfeeding does not affect them. So to remember this, that the breastfeeding does not affect the one that is breastfed with regards to his brothers and sisters and his usul also. That means his father and above. What is being affected with regards to the one that is breastfed is himself and his branches, meaning his sons and daughters and so on. These are the only ones affected by the breastfeeding. They become forbidden from, as mentioned in the 7 categories of nasab or lineage. With regards to the woman that breastfed, right, all of that is affected. Her origin, meaning the father and above, her branches, the sons and below, and her brothers and sisters and so on. And for her husband, all of them affects. So that means if a person is breastfed from a woman, that means it's forbidden for him, of course, to marry her. This is his mother from breastfeeding, and her mother and above, and her sons or her daughters in this case, and below, and also her sisters. Her sisters also are forbidden, as the verse mentioned. And if a woman breastfed another woman, becomes her mother in al-rada', so the men in the same with regards to that relationship are forbidden for the woman, and so on. So if you remember the 7 cases that are forbidden mentioned in the verse, the like of them are forbidden with regards to al-rada' or breastfeeding. And of course, what is basically what makes it forbidden? Is it one-time breastfeeding or more than that? What's forbids is 5 rada'at, 5 times of breastfeeding that are fulfilling or full breastfeeding. That means the child would be breastfed till he's satisfied and he doesn't want any more. Not al-massa wal massatan, as the Prophet said, not one suckling or 2, but rather it's a full breastfeeding that he is full and he rejected after he's done. That means he's done with it. And this is by the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, خمس رضعات معلومات يحرم. 5 breastfeeding that would forbid. And there are many, evidences with regards to this, and there are many, there's differences of opinions in this matter. So, and this has to be also, this is one condition, that it means it's 5. I'm just making that as brief as it can be. Has to be 5 times, and it has to be in the 2 years, in the first 2 years of the child. Because of the ayah, وَالْوَالِدَاتُ يُرْضِعْنَ أَوْلَادَهُنَّ حَوْلَيْنِ كَامِلَيْنِ لِمَنْ أَرَادَ أَنْ يُتِمَّ الرَّضَاعَةَ. When with regards to the 2 years, حَوْلَيْنِ كَامِلَيْنِ. So if it's done after the 2 years, it does not forbid, right? So this is before the 2 years. And, if anybody heard of, sometimes people, they talk about certain things with regards to the subject about Rida al-Kabir, or if a child is breastfed after the 2 years, does he become forbidden? The correct opinion that he does not forbid after the 2 years. It's only before the 2 years. There are another opinion, and Aisha radiallahu anha, she used to take that opinion, that if the child is breastfed after 2 years, he is also forbidden, if it's done also 5 times and so on. And this is the case of Salim, he was one of the servants of Hudayfa radiallahu anhu. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said to the mother or the wife of Hudayfa, because so that he can go in and out without being forbidden on her, he says to her, أرضعي تحرمي علي. That means if you breastfeed him, you become forbidden for him. And some said that this was specific for that case. And what is meant by ardi'i, by the way, does not mean that he would breastfeed physically, but rather to drink the milk that would come out of the breast of this mother, and not necessarily to do the physical breastfeeding. So this can valid happen. I mean, if a child, for example, is 4 years old and he drink the milk that came out of the breast of a woman, for example, and it's full 5 times, for example, does that forbid that child on this woman? The correct opinion that he is not forbidden. But some opinion that also forbids it if that happened, but the correct opinion that does not forbid him. So again, الرضاعة تحرم وتحرم الولادة. And if since they become forbidden, like a person marrying his daughter or her marrying his sister, of course this is not permissible. So the same thing with regards to breastfeeding. So if it happened that people get married when they're not knowing that they were both brothers and sisters in breastfeeding, then if once they get to know, for example, they have to be separated because it's not permissible for them to be married. And if there's any children as a result of this marriage, the children are valid and they are to be related to their parents. They are not, born out of wedlock or anything like this, because the nasab or the lineage will be there because it was done by mistake. So this is the hadith in brief, and the details of that, of course, in the books of fiqh. But it's important to mention, as this is one of the very clear rulings in matters of the deen. So الرضاعة تحرم ما تحرم الولادة.